capitalism as a world economy that enriches the minority white populations of Europe, North America, and elsewhere at the expense of Africa and the world's peoples. This process of enslaving Africa and African people, along with the rape and plunder of the rest of the world, consolidated the European nation. It gave Europe a reactionary sense of sameness that was tied to the material basis of its stolen wealth and the social system born of slavery and colonialism. In other words, the consolidation of the world capitalist economy and the European nation came as a consequence of assaulting the unity of Africa and African people. Not just Africans, of course. The same thing happened to the indigenous peoples here and various other places. It is this part of the process of the creation of a sense of sameness, that even the whole concept of white people is a concept of self-definition as compared to all the other people. And it came about as a consequence of a process of actual theft of resources. And this is what we need to remember when we talk about the advent of what we call a European nation as opposed to the French, the British, and the German, etc. nation, is that what we have to remember is that it did occur at the same time as the emergence of capitalism. And before capitalism in Europe, there was what? Feudalism. And feudalism was a time when people were tied to these estates, to the land under the direct control of the feudal nobility. And this was direct authority, direct control, you know. That's why Robin Hood was peed off, right? Because of how, you know, the nobility, you know, dominated everything, taxed the people to no end, etc. The king was all of this. And the king ruled by virtue of divine right. And so, but now, as a consequence of Europe going into Africa, going into the Americas and other places and taking all these resources, you have all these resources coming into Europe and transforming Europe. You have growth in the capacity for production. You have resources and transformation that lend themselves to the emergence of technology and factory production, you know, etc., and to the a new group, that a social force that would challenge the nobility and feudalism, because what has to happen now cannot happen under feudalism, because the people who now are tied to the land as serfs and what have you have to be free in order to sell their labor power to this new group, this new emerging class. They have to be free to sell their labor power. This is necessary for capitalism to emerge full-blown in this new situation. And again, people have to be free from the land. They have to be able to go to work in the emerging factories. They have to be able to go to work at the places on the coast where the slave ships are coming. They got to build the houses and do all these other things, not for a single noble family or a noble lord, but they have to be accessible to this new crew that's now looting the world, pirates and other forces, slave owners and holders, bringing all this loot and wealth that's transforming Europe. I know they teach us in the books, civics and history books, that it was John Locke and other people who wrote lofty tomes on freedom and democracy that caused the revolution. But the truth is that the revolution became absolutely necessary for the development of capitalism. Capitalism could not happen. People had to be free from the land And the nobility had to be overthrown, even because at one juncture, you know that you had the nobility even had a monopoly on slave trade. So you had these royal slave entities. I think that in England it was called the Royal African. No, it was something that the acronym is RACE, and some people that's where race came from. But anyway, the nobility, so they had to be knocked out of the way because the demand was a free trade. We want a right to sell black people too. And so, you know, this was part of the stuff that went into the struggle that overthrew the nobility and feudalism so that capitalism could emerge in the world. But if capitalism was going to emerge in the world, and if the people, laboring people, were going to have the ability to go and sell their labor power to whomever they wanted to sell it to, what was it then that was going to hold them loyal to the ruling class? Right? If you got rid of they're not controlled and dominated on the estates anymore, right? If the sheriff can't come by and do what they, because you know, I know Robin Hood took credit for it, but it wasn't he. You know, if they now have to be free and go work for whomever they want, what is it that maintains their loyalty to the bourgeoisie? My country, tears of the sweet land. It is nationalism. The nation becomes something that becomes necessary. It serves a particular function. That's what patriotism is. Patriotism is loyalty to the ruling class. That's all patriotism is. That's why you have all these leftists who tell us that no, I'm not unpatriotic because I'm opposed to the war. I'm a patriot. Of course they're patriots. It's loyalty to the ruling class, to the bourgeoisie in this country. That's what patriotism is. And so along with this comes the flag and all the symbols that make your heart go aflutter. Right? And holidays, all the holidays from Halloween to Easter contribute to the sense of sameness. Right? But a sense of sameness alone, I mean, just, you know, like that is a part of it. But the other factor is it rests upon a material base. That the nation and the sense of sameness is reinforced by a material base. There's a material basis for it. And so we talk about the European nation and a sense of sameness that colors its consciousness, informed so much of who they are, and that is tied to slavery. That is tied to the entire imperial project that places the Indians and all these other people in these places. The European nation, as we define it, is a nation that is defined by its whiteness, but that ain't enough. And Christianity, which is why, in part, there is such a thing as Holocaust, which is why, as hard as they try, Turkey cannot become a part of the European nation, the European Union, no matter how hard they prostrate themselves, because they're what? Muslims. Which is why Ataturk, who is given credit for being the founder of the Turkish nation, worked so hard to remove Islam as a factor of the political identity of the Turks. So, but again, we're not talking about something that's static. I mean, there's an ongoing process. I mean, we say the nation emerges as a part of a process to solve a problem here that Europe had. How was it going to move forward? How was progress going to be there? How was capitalism going to emerge? If you got all the laboring people that they're free to go and sell the power to, what is it that keeps them loyal to the bourgeoisie? It is patriotism. It is the flag. And of course, everybody knows in America that God is a combination of Jesus, Billy Graham, and Elvis Presley. You know, I mean, that's a toxic mix. But the point that I'm making, of course, is that these symbols are not without value to keeping a coherent, cohesive group united around the bourgeoisie, united around their own oppressor, the nation. So I'm going to say a little more about that, I hope, in the process of this discussion. And I have how much time? Until, okay. Somebody say I got plenty of time. So it's the imperialists who are out of time, right? So what I want to read a little. In 1914, nearly 500 years after the initial European assault on Africa and 30 years after the Berlin Conference that divided Africa to facilitate European exploitation, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League was established under the leadership of Garvey. And the UNIA launched the International African Anti-Colonial Resistance Movement to unite Africans in a concerted effort to liberate and unify our motherland and the forcibly dispersed and enslaved African nation. The UNIA consolidated Africans in Africa and throughout the world into a united organization with a single center and leadership. Under the slogan, Africa for Africans at home and abroad, UNIA brought together 11 million members and supporters in the largest anti-imperialist organization in the world. And this was in the early 20th century when resistance to imperialist colonialism was growing throughout the world. And what you need to also remember is that there have been eras in history where there have been quite open changes in the definitions of who was a part of what nation. Europeans have come together and redrawn the maps and declared themselves this and that over a period of time. It's not clearly, and I'm talking about now within the narrowly defined what we refer to as nations. And in almost every instance, this has come about as a consequence of some kind of struggle over resources, after wars, and things like that. Wars often serve to pull the unity together, and wars that divide them. And during the time when Garvey came about, again, in the early part of the 20th century, you're talking about a time where the first imperialist war was happening, and which was a war to redivide the world. Anybody who doubts us when we say that that's what that war was fought about, you know, all you got to do is that even look at what was going on at places like at the League of Nations. That's the time when Germany lost control of what they now refer to as Rwanda, and the Belgians got control of it. Okay, you lost, give this to Belgium, and what have you. You're on the wrong side. It's a war to redivide the world. And the whole question of who controlled what territories. And that was so brilliant of Garvey, such a magnificent leader, because they were talking about who was going to have control of this part of Africa, that part of Africa. And that was what made the slogan, Africa for Africans. Africa for Africans. That's who gets Africa, not the League of Nations, not some other European entity. Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad. That's what informed and influenced that demand. And Garvey sent forces to the League of Nations and to other countries, etc., to trying to win that position that, you know, it shouldn't be anybody. We should represent Africa and African people, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League. And then, just in case, he was building an army on the side.